All right, going to go over some Western world news and some East Asian news in this update. From Elon Musk, the first starships to Mars will launch in 2 years when the next Earth transfer window opens. These will be uncrewed to test the reliability of landing intact on Mars. If those landings go well, then the first crewed flights to Mars will be in 4 years. Flight rate will grow exponentially from there, with the goal of building a self-sustaining city in about 20 years. Being multiplanetary will vastly increase the probable lifespan of consciousness, as we will no longer have all of our eggs, literally and metabolically, on one planet. Interesting thoughts from Elon there. Industrial shock. Production in Germany collapses dramatically. They are in a recession, and they have been for quite some time now, an actual declared one. And even though many countries are electing not to declare a recession right now, even though they are in recessions. Dramatic collapse of Germany's industrial production, down 2.4% in July compared to the previous month. From a resident of Springfield, Ohio, she complains to the mayor about foreign men not speaking English camping on her front yard every night. She tells that she and her husband are living in Springfield for over 45 years and are planning to move out because the situation has become unbearable due to 20,000 Haitian migrants that came following the COVID-19 pandemic. Springfield itself has 58,000 residents at the 2020 census. So that would be quite a substantial increase if there really is 20,000 Haitian migrants that came. And we see this same trend happening across a lot of cities and a lot of states, and even globally, people moving out of areas because of this. And specifically this, but not from Haiti. The resident adds that the migrants, whom exclusively men, yell at her and her elderly husband, have trashed her front yard, some of them even sleeping every night in front of her home. The local government of Springfield says that 20,000 Haitians came legally, they quoted as saying, that they are powerless to stop them and that they are good for the local economy, as journalists are quick to point out that they came to Springfield for the couple or so warehouses that opened up in the recent years. In the recent months, posts coming from longtime residents of Springfield, Ohio have been going viral on X, complaining of household pets, ducks, geese being hunted down and cooked in the open by Haitian migrants who are apparently looking for jobs, according to the mayor. And we'll see that there's a global attack on X happening. I wonder why. Could it be because people are going there and voicing these things? Well, for now, that's at least allowing them to vent those things. What happens when people no longer have an outlet to vent that? From Jared Taylor, what may be the biggest Hindu temple in the world opened this month in Robbinsville, New Jersey, of all places. It was built by the Hindu sect Swazi, Akshar, whatever the rest of that is, or BAPS for short. It sits on 180 acres just east of Trenton, the state capital. The main building is 200 feet tall, and the golden demon statue is 42 feet tall. ... There are 13,500 statues of Hindu demons in the building. BAPS has built hundreds of temples like the one in Robbinsville across the U.S. and the wider globe. The Robbinsville temple is supposed to have cost $96 million, and it is said that BAPS had 13,500 workers spending 12 years building it, many of the workers being devout volunteers, according to BAPS. The philosophy of the BAPS sect is faithful, unity, and selfless service, but it turns out the vast majority of the 13,500 laborers were not volunteers at all. In 2021, the New York Times, of all papers, or all publishers, accused BAPS of using forced labor on the Robbinsville temple. According to investigators, BAPS lured men from India with the promise of high-paying jobs in the U.S. only to confiscate the passports of its workers once they arrived in Robbinsville and lock them up on the construction site. That is exactly what Dubai did to Indians as well. They seem to not be learning their lesson. The Indian workers were virtual slaves being paid about $1.20 an hour. BAPS brought those 13,500 workers legally under R1 visas, which are issued for ministers and non-ministers in religious vocations and occupations. BAPS instructed each laborer to lie to U.S. consular officials and claim that they were highly skilled workers specialized in religious artwork when the jobs were hard manual labor, and the U.S. Foreign Service fell for it. Shocker. Last month, the state of New Jersey issued a $195,000 fine, which is very insignificant, for one of BAP's subcontractor companies for a wide variety of labor violations. BAPS now stands accused of using the selflessness of thousands of Indians to build their temples across the U.S. The civil suit started by the state of New Jersey is now on hold as the feds have launched a criminal investigation into BAP's temple building. Notice they launch an investigation for that, but for other stuff, they jump right to the gun. Here we go. In Germany, it looks like the AfD party is going to win in another election. The latest voting polls in the state of Brandenburg shows AfD leading in voting intentions. The next election in Brandenburg is scheduled for September 22nd, 2024. Previously, in 2019, AfD doubled its seats in Landtag of Brandenburg, in the Landtag of Brandenburg, rising from 12.2% to 23.5%, staying only 3% behind the SPD, who won 26%, who had collapsed from 32% in 2014. Now the AfD looks like it's about to win the third German state, following victories in Thuringia and Saxony. On the topic of nuclear reactors, small nuclear reactors could power the future. The challenge is building the first one in the U.S. Now, before we get into this topic, we need to talk about something called electron cascading. You see, the Earth has what's called an ionosphere, and that's what deflects energy coming from the sun from hitting us. And that the ionosphere goes down into the Earth's core. It's the Earth's core that generates the magnetic field. And when you have a high concentration of energy, electrons, they build into the ionosphere. And when solar flares happen, you'll notice that earthquakes happen right afterwards because the solar flare hits the electromagnetic field and causes a reverberation to go down into the Earth's core, which causes earthquakes. So could you imagine if we started building nuclear reactors all over the world and started pumping a bunch of energy into the Earth's ionosphere and thus into the core? The result would be earthquakes. Very powerful and very frequent earthquakes. New nuclear plant designs called small modular reactors, or SMRs, could speed deployment of carbon-free power in the future as electricity demand rises. These small reactors would have simpler designs, making them easier and cheaper to build than current plants, but the cost of building a first-of-its-kind project has been a hurdle to commercializing the technology in the U.S. Several power companies are looking at upgrading existing plants with these smaller ones, and it's all about carbon footprint and reducing or improving green energy, supposedly. The U.S. has been pointed at as having a weak military presence in the Asia-Pacific region. However, the U.S. Points out that it has a significant presence there, just no aircraft carriers. And I think many people see aircraft carriers as a symbol of force, but that's not true anymore in our modern age. Combined, many of these ships could carry significantly more firepower and kinetic energy than an aircraft carrier, or than multiple aircraft carriers. And so that the age of weaponry is not the same as it was in World War II, and even throughout the 1970s and 80s, it has now shifted, and we see that playing out in many parts of the world with UAVs and cruise missiles. The FBI reports that over 2,800 influencers on social media are being paid by the Russian Federation to spread disinformation, 600 of which are based in the U.S., allegedly. I see this as making Russia out to be the boogeyman, and we'll have to wait for the investigations to conclude, and hopefully we get some somewhat honest information out of that, because I would like to sincerely know if any of this is actually true. Supposedly, an unsealed FBI doc exposes terrifying depth of Russian disinfo scheme. New court documents reveal that Russia is keeping a very, very long list of influencers to spread its propaganda. Okay, keeping a long list and actually paying people are two different things. And why would you need to take Russia's money? You make so much money off of different social media platforms once you get monetized, like a significant amount of money. I guess if people were very greedy, then they could be subdued by that. U.S. University to end China partnerships amid concerns over military ties. Georgia Tech is ending its research and educational partnerships with Chinese cities in Tianjin and Shenzhen, the U.S. university said on Friday, following scrutiny from Congress over its collaboration with entities allegedly linked to China's military. So we see this same thing, this same crackdown, almost as if it's being executed at a very specific time towards China and Russia. And we see a lot of news coming out. Back in 2014, there was a retired colonel who was speaking to an ocean that he was noticing propaganda coming out in a method that the U.S. has in its doctrine to prepare the public for a war, and it was being done with North Korea. So I take that retired colonel's information and I run it through this lens of seeing all this information coming out at exactly this time, right when a recession's happening, right when an election's happening, right when they want to control social media, right when they want to crack down on free speech and all this stuff. You see the boogeyman coming out, and you see a lot of supposed answers and solutions for our safety to protect us. Very interesting timing indeed. Is it a narrative building for a future conflict and to take away freedoms and consolidate power? We'll only see in the future. The UK government quietly gave amnesty to 88,000 asylum seekers, a Daily Mail report has uncovered. This comes after the Home Office refused to continue publishing statistics on the cost of housing asylum seekers as they deemed it too offensive or too sensitive. Southern border crisis helped spur massive spike in crossings from Canada as well. Diverting resources to combat the flow of migrants at the southern border helped contribute to a surge in new crossings at the northern border, one expert argues. The southern border always gets the attention and therefore gets the resources and the money, and the northern border then has vast areas that are just wide open. Laura Riaz, director of the Heritage Foundation's Border Security and Immigration Center, told Fox News Digital. During Biden, because of the numbers of crossings on the southern border, they pull resources from the northern border. Yeah, we went over that. The comments come after a report on CBS 19 detailed the plight of a northern border sector that has seen more apprehensions this fiscal year than the previous 13 years combined. According to the report, the Swanton border sector has recorded roughly 15,000 apprehensions in the first 10 months of fiscal year 2024, the largest volume ever recorded, and more than 14,000 more than 14,000 more than 2021, the first year President Biden was in office. And it goes on with a lot of other statistics if you want to go look that up. U.S. pitches deal to thwart Chinese military base in Africa. And I am noticing a macroeconomic shift in Africa as the West is pulling out, either voluntarily or being forced out by the governments of those areas. And we're seeing both China and Russia, but specifically China, winning the war for Africa via economic deals. The U.S. arrives with a sword and says, do what we want. And China shows up with a bank account and their Belt and Road Initiative, and people jump on board. And albeit it's nothing more than a payday loan in which the countries will never be able to pay back, and then will end up in indentured servitude to China. But nonetheless, in the short term, that speaks volumes more to these dictators and broken countries in Africa than it does with the sword coming in. And here's a graph of native versus foreign-born workers in the U.S., job gains for foreign-born workers, and job losses for native workers. So you see a big bifurcation happening here, which is interesting. This looks just like the graph of the stock market recovering after the collapse in 2019. Isn't that interesting? Bill Gates laments that the First Amendment strength on misinformation laments First Amendment strength on misinformation, essentially saying the First Amendment is allowing people to provide misinformation, and therefore he's advocating for a digital ID to help battle misinformation. Let's see if anybody else has something to say about that. Oh, Tony Blair urges global regulation of social media to curb hatred. He has concerns for free speech and government overreach in the digital space. I should say, someone has concerns for Tony Blair's government overreach in the digital space. Isn't that interesting? I wonder if these people have any clubs that they belong to in common. Strange. I guess it's just a coincidence in timing. This says, no warning, no explanation. YouTube bans political commentator Taylor Hanson. YouTube faces backlash for banning journalists without providing clear reasoning amid indictment fallout. So we see this indictment fallout is providing the means to just wipe away information from social media. If there's no other voice in the echo chamber, then you will only hear what they want you to hear. New, Tony Fauci, Lady Gaga joined Bill Gates in Netflix's new documentary series on the future of society. The future of society, wait a sec. Misinformation advocates for digital ID. Documentary, The Future with Bill Gates, premieres September 18th. I wonder what Bill Gates thinks about the future of society. The guy who largely set up much of what we know as today as the internet, as data hubs. Interesting. And if you look into the SolarWinds company that has access to 98% of all credentials, all government credentials, and their involvement with Windows, there's even some more interesting stuff there. Some 2 billion people, about a quarter of the world's population, already eat insects as part of their everyday diet, according to the United Nations. More people should join them, they think, according to a growing tribe of bug advocates who champion insects as a healthy and green choice. But it is the prospect of saving the planet enough to get people to sample their top creepy crawlies. Some experts encourage people to raise their children to be more tolerant of unusual food, including insects, because future generations will face the full consequences of climate crisis. Insects may well become the superfoods of the future, as coveted as quinoa and berries. They may be grudgingly eaten rather than sought out for the joy that a buttery steak or a hearty bowl of ramen brings. For now, Singapore chef Nicholas Lowe believes there is nothing pushing people to change their diets, especially in wealthy places where almost anything you want is a few clicks away. Younger consumers may be willing to taste them out of curiosity, but the novelty will wear off, he said. We are spoilt for choice. We like our meat as meats and our fish as fish. And there's a lovely picture of some bug options on bread with different spreads. Why not just remove the bugs and eat the bread in the spread? It's supposed to be our protein source. You may have heard some big changes are coming to Europe. Americans will need to register and be fingerprinted to gain entry starting in November. And there are really no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So you see more digital tracking, more biometrics, getting everybody registered. Why would they want to do that? Well, it's for our safety, really. It's for our safety. Now Asia is following suit by taking a page out of Europe's playbook. Well, Thailand anyways, which I just visited, and yes, they take your fingerprints when you come into the country. Beginning in December, all Americans will need travel authorization to visit Thailand. Contrast that, or juxtaposition of that, Russians not only don't have to do that, they also have a window of up to 90 days when they can stay. Americans only 30 days. So if actions are what you're measuring, wouldn't that infer Thailand is a bit warmer towards Russia than the United States? And China as well. So here's an interesting video. Let's go ahead and watch this.
I'm here with President Zelensky. I am such a admire what you and your country have done. You're trying to stop the Russians so we don't have to fight them. They don't want any American troops. They just need weapons to free their country of a terrible invasion. They're sitting on $1 trillion worth of minerals.
Oh, what was that? They're sitting on $1 trillion
Dollars worth of minerals that could be good.
Of minerals that could be good to our economy. I made a joke in my last video. I made reference to a joke in my last video about the U.S. Whenever somebody declares that they found oil or have oil, the U.S. goes and liberates them and brings them democracy kinetically if they don't partner with them. And here we see the quiet part being said out loud.
They're sitting on $1 trillion worth of minerals that could be good to our economy. So I want to keep helping our friends in Ukraine. We can win this. They need our help.
Yes, we need, and we have already. The biggest help is the support of American people and support of our friends. Thanks to Lindsey and his colleagues, to congressmen and senators from the United States. Thanks for this support, bipartisan support. Thank you so much.
Peace is coming.
Yes.
Man, Zelensky almost looks like he's got someone off camera making sure he says exactly what he's supposed to say. Look at that. I mean, he just looks like a beaten dog. He looks like he's just some whipping boy that they bring in front of the camera to try to give credence or efficacy to what they're saying. It's absolutely insane how open it all is, and yet people are just blindly living on like nothing's happening. Normalizing self-elected deletion. New film, The Room Next Door, pushes the agenda that voluntary self-deletion should be accessible for all. Director Almodovar's home country of Spain legalized that act in 2021, and he believes that the rest of the globe should follow suit. There should be the possibility to have that ability all over the world. It should be regulated, and a doctor should be allowed to help his patient. Wow. And this is an opinion paragraph here, but I'm going to go ahead and read it. What globalists and leftists are truly afraid of is large-scale rebellion that they can't control, the kind of rebellion that could end with the elites on the chopping block. They will do anything to avoid widespread revolution, which is why they're willing to take the risk of open mass censorship today. They know what is coming, and they're moving to mitigate the spread of anti-globalist views as much as possible before things get out of hand. This person says, I believe it's too late for them. Is it? Or is that what they want you to think? This is an interesting piece from Jim Brewer. I'm not sure if I can play it without getting a copyright strike, but if you want to go look up Jim Brewer sums up the Great Awakening happening across the world right now, I'm sure this video will pop up for you. It's on something called the Highwire with Del Bigtree. So pretty easy to go look up. It's a very good 4.5-5 minutes.
Back in like the 50s or the 60s, they had a whole movement going on. I might have the decades mixed up.
This is
Y'all
very
do
interesting.
research, but they started saying, yo, the children are eating paint chips. And because there's lead in the paint, we need to start removing all lead paint from now on. Right? Because I know you've heard about lead paint, right? Yeah, no more lead paint. Why? Because the babies is eating paint chips. In your lifetime, have you ever seen any kid eat paint chips before?
No.
You? Any paint chips? No? Oh.
Have you ever eaten pain chips? Have any of your kids ever eaten pain chips? Do you know anybody that's ever eaten pain chips as a kid or has kids that have eaten pain chips? This is a very good point. I never thought about this. Some of you probably have devices in your home that can emit an acoustic signal and bounce it back and provide sonar imagery of the inside of your house. In addition, you can use radar to penetrate walls if they're not lined with something that is radar blocking or radar absorbing, and you can see what the internals of that building look like and what people are doing, what people are saying.
Okay. You know, anytime you want somebody to do something without thinking, just say it's hurting the children. You know what I'm saying? Why would they want to remove lead paint from the homes?
Because
Here we go.
of the
Come on.
technology, because of it blocks radiation.
There we go.
It blocks radiation.
Look at them neurons firing. Superman is all powerful. But hey, put that kryptonite in the lead box, he won't know it's there. So how else am I gonna get frequencies, 5G and all that stuff to permeate through your walls and through your home, affecting you so I could see through your house and see your body and connect with you as a network if your paint got lead in it and I can't get in there? So get some lead paint, y'all. You ain't hear that from me.
Is it still?
Yeah, there's still lead paint. Yeah, they got EMF shielding paints and everything. It's a
Word.
listen, there's a whole world. Back in like the 50s.
Just some interesting food for thought. This post reads, fake Christianity, religiosity, and libertarianism are massive psyops and dialectic, bringing in the fourth industrial revolution. I have noticed the same things. There is a party of Christians that are significantly more about nationalism, and you should have pride in the country that you live in, regardless of the Bible saying pride cometh before the fall, and many warnings about pride. Regardless of any of that, you see the same thing. Religiosity in also the form of worshiping politics. And then they mention libertarianism, which is a form of that. Very interesting thoughts there. New York Times in 1977. The thread that linked the CIA and its propaganda assets was money. And the money frequently bought a measure of editorial control, often complete control. In some instances, the CIA simply created a newspaper or news service and paid the bills through a bogus corporation. In other instances, directly or indirectly, the agency supplied capital to an entrepreneur or appeared at the right moment to bail out a financially troubled organization. In Stockholm, the publication Argumenten received CIA funds through a channel so complex that even its editor was unaware of the source of the money. I think that is very well known now, and I'm sure they don't still do this today. I'm certain that they realized this wasn't right, this wasn't good, and they stopped doing it. Regardless of how effective it was, I'm sure they stopped, right? This drop in support for the United States should sound alarm bells in Washington, which sees China as its main competitor and the Indo-Pacific as a critical battleground. America is losing in Southeast Asia, while U.S. allies in the region are turning to China. And so I covered a bit of this in my last video, and it's very true. A lot of those areas are turning towards both Russia and China and turning away from the West. Like I said, the U.S. shows up with a sword and says, do democracy, and other countries show up with money and investments and say, here's some money, do stuff with it. Let's partner. Which one would you like to have happen to you as an individual? Russia is likely mapping underwater internet cables, supposedly, a NATO official said. It's also believed to be behind flight GPS interference. It's signaling it could wreak havoc with the West's electronic infrastructure, says experts. And I'm sure this is not why the U.S. government is partnering with Elon Musk to create a separate government internet system similar to Starlink. I'm sure that's not why they're partnering with Elon Musk. I'm sure that's not why Elon Musk is launching Starlink. I'm sure that's just a residual thing that happened because Gwen Shockwell is so smart, and I'm sure there was no strategy planned there, and this whole thing with Mars is 100% real, and it's not being used as a cover story to do this kind of stuff. I'm serious. Hear me. There's no way that sort of conspiracy theory is real. Absolutely not. And it's absolutely not true, or it's absolutely true that the boogeyman Russia is going to blow up internet cables and interfere with flight GPS, because that would not hurt its situation at all. Doing that would have no consequences on Russia at all. if you can pick up what I'm laying down. I don't know the source of this video, so I'm actually not going to play it. It could be just something someone created for misinformation, so not into it. Mexico, where entire police departments systematically kidnap and murder citizens. 6 police, I said the word, I'm probably going to get censored now. 6 police officers were arraigned and 7 more were arrested on Thursday as prosecutors continue investigating disappearances of the leaders attributed to members of the Taxco Guerrera police force. The arrest began last week, and nearly 60 local police agents were rounded up when state and federal authorities raided the Taxco Municipal Command and Control Center. Now, at least 17 more police agents have been detained and charged. A municipal trustee has been identified as a person of interest, and the mayor has filed an injunction to prevent his own arrest. Shocking. Green politician Hofreiter wants to block X if necessary. Now, why is everybody simultaneously turning against X? Could it possibly be that it's exposing stuff that they don't want exposed? Why does Gates want to do digital IDs? Why does Tony Blair want to do that? Why does it seem like the whole world is pivoting towards that? Because 5th generation hybrid warfare is for the mind as much as it is kinetic. There's more psychological incorporation now than ever before in history. Although it's always been there. And sorry if you hear my neighbor howling for some reason. It has already happened in Brazil. Now, Green Party politician Anton Hofreiter is proposing to restrict the use of the online platform X in Germany as well. He also says that more virtual agents are needed to take action against criminals. He justifies this with the fight against terror. There we go, the war on terror, the boogeyman, the undefined enemy that you can just use to do whatever you want. Like all the stuff we've seen since 9/11. The media is preparing to blame the collapse on random dissidents who used the social media platform they currently hope to censor. They are calling them far-right terrorgram. Chat rooms are feeling a wave of power grid attacks. So you can see they're coming after the social media networks. They're coming after the stuff where they don't have their people necessarily in place, or it's too big for them to monitor and sift through all that information. So let's look at East Asia stuff. Go ahead and jump to the bottom and scroll back up. So Cambodia has asked China to provide 2 warships, which are currently headed to Ream Naval Base, with the Defense Ministry stating they will aid the kingdom's capability to maintain peace and security, as well as conduct search and rescue missions. So we see Southeast Asia, again, pivoting towards China. China has signed multiple agreements with Chad and Senegal involving projects ranging from electricity and infrastructure to drinking water and communications technology. At the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in Beijing, the country's presidents set on Wednesday. Egypt has reportedly signed an agreement with China to purchase J-10C fighter jets, aiming to replace its aging fleet of F-16 Fighting Falcons. So again, you see Africa, Southeast Asia pivoting towards China. New podcast. Bob Moriarty discusses the possibility of China taking Taiwan very soon. Numerous developments around the world, including the United States, are telling. Beijing has been acting more belligerent than usual. Any such move would be coordinated with Russia, Iran, and potentially North Korea. The West is collapsing, and the question is who is it going to take with it on the way down? The deep state is going more totalitarian because it is losing, as theories such as the fourth turning forecast. But there will also be a counter movement back to freedom, reads the opinion piece, which is very interesting. The question is this misinformation from China to make people think this, or is this really what's happening? That is up to you to decide in your own mind. So that's all I have for Western East Asia news. Let's see what we have on the miscellaneous news. I have some African news update. Heavy fighting was recorded in Amhara In the last 48 hours, at least 100 ENDF troopers have become casualties, whether injured or killed. It's unknown. I believe that's Ethiopian Defense Force. I will tell you why. This person's post reads, it's an opinion piece. I will tell you why, my dear, that the Ethiopian government is so extremely invested in seething about Somalia and Egypt. So Ethiopia versus Somalia and Egypt. While completely neglecting a four-fronted insurgency in Tigray, Amhara, Oromo, and Ogaden, instead of trying to rally the Ethiopian people against a foreign enemy. To put it bluntly, they know they are effed. The quickest way to unite people is through uniting them against a foreign enemy. Egypt completely fits the bill. After all, during the 1800s, Egypt expanded as far south as Somalia and even slightly into Ethiopia. But we were met by defeat after that. We never bothered anymore. Thus, they tried to play on past events and memories. And the fact that uniting people against a foreign enemy usually works 9 out of 10 times. Doesn't it? Doesn't it? The Ethiopian government has fought in constant warfare for the past 4 years, with over anywhere from 300 to 700,000 people dead and millions of internally displaced people. I am sure that they are salivating at the idea that they can unite the Abyssinian people against a foreign enemy because it means no more internal wars. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed warns Somalia and Egypt that anyone who threatens Ethiopia will be militarily destroyed. The threat comes after news surfaced of Egyptian special forces being deployed to Somalia. This post reads, ISSP expands control in the tri-border region. The Islamic State Sahel province has cut off a district capital in western Niger, threatening to expand its control into Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger border areas. Interesting that France pulled out of all of those areas in the last year. ISSP carried out a large ambush on a Nicaraguan convoy traveling on the N5 road between the district capitals. And there's that image on the screen if you want to go ahead and reference it. Locals reported that ISSP has now taken control of this part of the N5 and encircled Bankilar. ISSP's recent gains are a significant setback given that security forces had strongly contested the group in the area over the previous year to prevent the group from establishing strong support zones, but are now unable to exert the same level of counterinsurgency pressure. These gains enable ISSP to project greater pressure on vital roadways connecting Niger and Burkina Faso. The N5 connects to the N23, which links northwestern Niger to Burkina Faso. Bankilar is less than 20 miles from the N1, which connects western Niger to Mali. And in Middle East news, I believe I have a couple things. So here's the video of Erdogan calling for an Islamic alliance against Israel. Let's see what language it's in.
Israeli occupation, which we do not know where it will stop, they should take up a shared stance. Since the very beginning, we have been making this call. Israel is spoiled and is carrying out state terror in an outlawed way, and the only thing that can stop it is the alliance of Islamic countries.
So there we go. Erdogan calling for Islam to unite against Israel. I'll go ahead and shrink my screen back down here. All right. So again, went over this before. You draw a line down Finland, around the bulge in Belarus, and over here to the fronts in Ukraine, and you keep going down, you draw a line. So I would almost wager that Russia is probably trying to get to about here, halfway or greater through Ukraine, which would allow it to have another area for Belarus to come into Ukraine, as well as better access to the Black Sea down here. Instead of having to navigate through here, it could protect Crimea, as well as have more port access down here. It's just an interesting line to look at. The bulge being Belarus here. And again, the battle front is about like this right now, with a bulge in the Kursk region, which I believe, yeah, Kursk region right here. All right, so we have a bulge here, and then the front shaped like this around the Dnieper River and aiming towards the Dnieper River. So potentially that is what they're looking to achieve, is a new border using the Dnieper River. Only time will tell. The fact that Turkey, a NATO country, is calling for an Islamic alliance against Israel, who's in a key strategic partnership with the United States, that is going to provide a lot of turbulence, if you know what I mean. Being that the United States is perhaps the biggest voice in NATO, and you could say the puppet master, perhaps. Yeah, it's interesting time, folks. I'll keep the updates coming. If you have any questions, any input, thoughts, let me know in the comments. Until next time, stay exponentially aware.